The mist was still lifting off the lake when I cast my first line. Water flat as glass, pine in the air. Just that soft plunk of the lure breaking the surface and the slow ripple spreading out toward the reeds. It was quiet in the way only early mornings can be. Then an SUV door slammed behind me. I turned. Karen HOA president, linen blazer at 6:12 a.m., clipboard tucked to her chest like a badge of office, was already halfway down my dock. "You've been notified before," she said, handing me a printed sheet. $5,000. Unauthorized fishing in HOA-controlled waters. I read it once. $5,000. Payable in 10 days. Or they'd escalate to a lien. "This lake is community-restricted recreational property," she added. "We enforce aggressively here." I let the paper hang at my side. No raised voice. No argument. "Can you show me where the HOA owns the water?" She smirked like I'd just admitted guilt. What she didn't know was that I work for the state. I reeled in slowly, drove home, and pulled out my closing file. I'm 46. Did 12 years in the Army before I traded uniforms for field inspections and policy manuals. These days I work environmental compliance for the state, wetlands, waterways, land use disputes. Nothing glamorous, mostly paperwork and people who don't read it. I'm divorced. My son's 15. Fishing is the one thing that still gets him off his phone and talking like he used to. That cabin wasn't an investment strategy, it was neutral ground. Wood smoke, cheap coffee, early mornings on the dock. I don't throw my title around. Off duty, I'm just another homeowner cutting his own grass, but I keep records. Always have. When I bought the place, I remember pausing at a line in the title report, subject to recorded public access easement language. It struck me as odd, but the realtor brushed it off. "Standard boilerplate," she said. Still it stuck. Why would a private HOA lake carry public access language? I pulled the plat map from my closing binder and spread it across the kitchen table. The wording wasn't boilerplate. It contradicted Karen outright. Confusion hardened into suspicion. Karen wasn't new to leverage. Before the HOA, she'd been a real estate agent, the kind who talked about curating communities and protecting asset class integrity. After she got elected president, enforcement became her signature issue. She called it maintaining exclusivity, new parking rules, landscaping citations, dock inspections, fines that arrived faster than welcome letters. She hosted wine nights on her back patio, cultivated alliances, and reminded everyone that property values don't protect themselves. Socially, she moved like she owned the place. Legally, she relied on gray areas. Where documents were vague, she filled in the blanks. Where language was broad, she narrowed it, always in the HOA's favor. She weaponized ambiguity. I clarified it. A neighbor, Tom, mentioned once that she'd stopped him from launching a kayak, claiming insurance liability exposure. He'd backed down. Most people did. It's easier than fighting a board with lawyers on retainer. Which raised the real question, was Karen confused about the law, or was she counting on everyone else being confused? 3 days later, the certified letter arrived, and confusion turned into pressure. The certified letter showed up on a Thursday, red stamp. Formal tone. Non-payment would result in suspension of clubhouse privileges, restriction of dock use, and initiation of a lien against my property. The fine had grown to $5,450 administrative penalties. 10 days. I called the attorney listed at the bottom. He sounded relaxed, bored. "The association governs recreational usage of common elements," he said. "Understood," I replied. "Can you provide the deeded ownership description of the lake bed?" A pause. Paper shuffling. "The lake is represented as private within the governing documents. That's not what I asked." Another pause. Longer this time. "In any case," he said carefully, "payment will avoid further escalation." I thanked him and hung up. In most states, natural lakes aren't privately owned the way lawns are. The water, up to the ordinary high water mark, falls under state jurisdiction, public trust doctrine. It's not complicated, but it's specific. I opened my laptop and pulled up the state GIS portal, layer by layer, parcel lines over water classification maps. Then the Department of Natural Resources database. What I saw didn't match Karen's narrative, but digital maps aren't final proof. For that, I needed the county records. The county clerk's office smells like dust and toner, fluorescent lights, metal chairs that scrape when you sit down. I requested the original 1987 development filing for our subdivision and waited while the clerk rolled out a cart stacked with thick binders. Halfway through the declaration, I found it buried in paragraph 14. The lake shall remain designated as navigable state waterway, shoreline parcels subject to public trust doctrine. I read it twice. That language doesn't leave much room for interpretation. The HOA might own landscaping along the bank, maybe the docks if they were registered as common elements, but not the water. Then I found something better. A 1994 amendment request from the original developer seeking to convert the lake into restricted private access, stamped across the top in bold ink. Denied. State review cited navigability classification, so the state had already shut this down once, which raised the obvious question: if privatization was rejected in 1994, why was the HOA still claiming control now? I paid for certified copies and slid them into my folder. This was the smoking gun. And I still hadn't shown anyone my badge. By Monday, Karen made sure the whole neighborhood knew she intended to escalate. The clubhouse smelled like burnt coffee and lemon disinfectant. Folding chairs. About 30 neighbors. Karen stood at the front with a projector slide titled Lake Compliance Update. "We have a homeowner violating established lake regulations," she began. No name. She didn't need one. A few heads turned toward me anyway. She talked about protecting property values, about preventing outsider misuse, about liability exposure and maintaining standards. When she opened the floor for comments, I stood. "Can you clarify the association's recorded ownership of the lake bed?" The room went quiet in that uncomfortable, shifting-in-your-seat way. Karen smiled thinly. "The governing documents are clear. I'm asking about the deed." A flicker crossed her face. "Failure to remit payment will result in immediate lien filing." There it was. Public pressure as leverage. I nodded once. I'd recommend reviewing the 1987 plat filing before proceeding. A murmur moved through the room. She dismissed it with a wave. "This board will not be intimidated by misinformation." Meeting adjourned. The next morning, new signs stood along the shoreline. "FOA private water, no fishing without Borval." That's when I decided to stop being patient. I went back the next morning in uniform, not tactical, not dramatic. Just state khakis, field boots, department patch on the shoulder, the kind of outfit that makes contractors suddenly careful with their answers. The new sign was bolted into the grass beside my dock. HOA private water, no fishing, without board approval. I unfastened it with a socket wrench and laid it flat on the dock. An SUV door slammed. "You can't remove association property," Karen snapped, striding toward me. I turned and held up my credentials. Gold seal, State Environmental Compliance Division. Her pace slowed. "Posting false private control over a navigable state waterway can constitute regulatory misrepresentation," I said evenly, "especially if residents are being fined under that claim." Color drained, just slightly. "I'm opening a compliance inquiry into the association's signage and representations. Not personal," I added. "Procedural." No raised voice. No threat. Just process. For the first time, she wasn't the authority on the dock. She was a board president standing on state-classified water, but instead of backing down, she made one more call. And that's when it turned into something bigger. 2 weeks later, the association received a formal notice requiring documentation of its claimed lake ownership. The hearing room was small. County seal on the wall, digital recorder humming softly on the table. Karen sat beside the HOA attorney. Confident posture, tighter smile. I presented the 1987 recorded plat first, the language about navigable state waterway, public trust doctrine, then the 1994 amendment request, dented in thick black ink. Finally, printed photos of the posted signs and copies of the $5,450 fine notice. The hearing officer adjusted his glasses and read silently for a long moment. The HOA attorney cleared his throat. "Given the documentation presented, the association withdraws its assertion of exclusive lake ownership." Just like that, Karen leaned forward. I was protecting community standards. The officer didn't look up. An HOA cannot supersede state water rights, nor can it levy fines based on inaccurate representations of ownership. The recorder clicked softly in the silence. It wasn't dramatic, no gavel slam. just the steady correction of the record. And once the record shifts, consequences tend to follow. The compliance order came in writing a week later, all fishing-related fines rescinded. Signage removed immediately. Written clarification to be mailed to every homeowner acknowledging that the lake is designated navigable state water. Administrative penalties assessed for misrepresentation. It wasn't criminal. No handcuffs, just invoices and mandatory corrections. But money talks. The HOA's insurance carrier sent its own letter soon after, flagging potential exposure for board-level misrepresentation. Coverage reviews tend to make volunteer presidents reconsider their enthusiasm. Karen resigned for personal reasons before the next meeting. No speech. No apology, just a short email and a vacancy. A new board formed within a month. Fewer wine nights. More open records. Meetings that felt less like theater. Neighbors stopped me at the mailbox. "We didn't know," Tom said quietly. "We thought she had the authority. Most people aren't looking for a fight. They just assume the person with the clipboard is right. I could have taken a seat on that board. Instead, I chose something else." The following Saturday, my son stood beside me on the dock, sunlight breaking through the pines, tackle box open between us. Two other neighbors were casting lines farther down the shoreline. No signs, no tension, just water moving the way it always had. The new board asked if I'd consider joining. I declined, suggested open record transparency instead. Publish decisions, cite documents, keep authority boring and visible. That was enough. My son hooked the first base of the morning and grinned like he used to. I watched the ripples spread across the lake and thought about how close it came to being something else. The water was never hers to control. So tell me, when that $5,000 fine showed up, would you have paid it or pushed back? Next week, a retired veteran loses his driveway over 6 inches of dirt. If this story meant something to you, if you believe property rights shouldn't depend on who has the loudest voice in the room, go ahead and like the video. It helps more than you think. Scuster if you're the kind of person who reads the fine print and refuses to be bullied by it. Every week, we break down real stories where calm strategy beats reckless authority. And I want to hear from you. Have you ever had an HOA try to enforce something that didn't sit right? Did you fight it or let it go? Drop your experience in the comments. Somebody else here might need that insight, because the truth is, most overreach survives on silence, and silence is optional.